Most of the businesses I work with, they're amazing at what they do. They have great offers. Their clients love them. But like many businesses, they grew through word of mouth, got referrals, and they were doing really well until they weren't and hit a wall.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the How to Scale a Business podcast. My name is Hector Santiesteban and I am your host for today. Our special guest is Miss Stacy Eleczko, and she is we'll call her a buyer and business. I don't know if wizard is the right one. I don't know if definitely not fairy. I'm trying to think of like a magical, mystical person that helps connect businesses to their customers, because it seems like that's sort of what you do, is to help illuminate that. And so all that to say anyway, Stacy, welcome to the show and thanks for hanging out today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I will say I've been called the Queen of Clarity. So I don't know if that's really magical, but
There we go. I should have put that on my bio list. So we'll go with that. And I think that's so important because businesses struggle so long trying to figure out exactly that, what their buyers want and how to get it across that they have something that can help. So I'd love for you to share with us a couple of key milestones in your career and sort of what you've done along the way, and then a little bit about what you do with your clients now.
yeah, absolutely. So I sort of stumbled into entrepreneurship, I think, which is really fascinating to me. If you had asked me 5 years ago if I would ever own a business, much less be talking about growing or scaling a business, I would have probably laughed at you. I was in education for over 20 years. And when I shifted out, my goal was to find a job copywriting. And to sort of get those copywriting chops, I did some projects for a few friends. And before I knew it, those turned into referrals. And I'd kind of stumbled into starting a business, it seemed. And here I am. I've been 3.5 years in, and I absolutely love what I do, which is supporting small businesses and some solopreneur businesses as well grow and scale their businesses through strategic messaging. So I help them figure out their positioning, where they fit in the market, the white space that they can claim, what the differentiated value is that they provide, and then how to clearly communicate that. So it is connecting with the right people and they're building consistency in how they communicate across their brand.
What are the biggest problems, challenges, maybe mistakes, or maybe even blind spots that you see a lot of businesses have, that if they were able to see around these or sort of take the needle out of the proverbial eye, things would be so much easier for them?
Yeah. So I think there's two. One I would say is the more expertise we have and the longer we do what we do, the harder it is to speak about it clearly and concisely. Our messaging tends to get diluted. And because we have so much expertise, we feel like, oh, I should be able to do this, and then tend to kind of delay seeking support for it. Another big thing is this idea of jumping straight to tactics, because I think it feels productive, right? We can work on lead generation, or let's just tweak the website, or let's run some ads without making sure that those strategic pieces of the positioning and messaging are in place first. And some of that happens just because most of the businesses I work with, they're amazing at what they do. They have great offers, their clients love them. But like many businesses, they grew through word of mouth, got referrals, and they were doing really well until they weren't and hit a wall. And then that's when they tend to jump to those tactics.
Yeah, it really is an important process. I'm curious, are there certain industries or certain verticals that you think are particularly susceptible to these sort of issues or challenges, or ones that you think would have a bigger benefit if they were to make some adjustments that you talk about or that you work with your clients?
Yeah. So I would say more broadly, I think it's service based businesses, which is who I work with. And it's because we don't have really a tangible offer, right? When you're talking about a product, it's so much easier to talk about the outcome or what somebody's going to get as a result of that product. But when you're delivering a service, it's much harder to quantify what those results are going to be. And so that's just a challenge to begin with. And within service based businesses, the companies that I've worked with that I found to have the hardest time doing this tend to be coaches and consultants. And it's partially because the market really is saturated. There are so many people doing those things. If you don't have the proper research and you haven't really dug in to figure out what sets you apart or how to communicate that clearly, it's just a sea of kind of the sameness, right? And it's really hard to figure out how to keep yourself from blending in.
Yeah, I remember hearing a talk from Christopher Lockhead one time, and I think he wrote the book. What was the name of the book? Big or something. But essentially, he was someone early on who talked about category creation and the need to be able to create your own category. And it seems that a lot of service based businesses, if they don't do that, they sort of either get lumped in with all the other ones with no real way to distinguish themselves. Or they do, they sort of separate themselves and they sort of become a category of one because a lot of people in that sort of space, the thing about a coach or a consultant or someone who's a service provider in that sort of sense, it seems like they may be the only one who can do this sort of thing. And so it's important for them to tell the market that and sort of have the right sort of messaging so they're not grouped in with everybody else.
Exactly. And sometimes it's not even that you're the one who really kind of owns that category. You're just the first one who said you did. And so, or who said it the most clearly. And so I think that's why, again, like it's like beating on a dead horse with me with the research, the evidence, but really knowing and understanding how to position yourself. And part of that is knowing what's in the market, who your competitors are, how they're messaging and what they're talking about. So that if there is a space you can claim, either because, hey, this is the category we own, or you know what, a lot of other people are in the same category, but nobody else is talking about it. Let's plant our flag in the ground here. That definitely gives you a strategic advantage.
So, how much of the mix is external versus internal? You talked about looking at competitors and looking at the market, and then obviously there's got to be some sort of assessment internally of strengths and values and that sort of thing. And so, what does that mix look like, or is that a process, or how do you help people navigate those sort of three, perhaps even competing different forces?
Yeah. So I think of positioning kind of like a three-legged stool. And what I find is most people tend to miss one or two of these. And so the first to me is really about your brand. Who are you as a brand? What's your purpose? What's your mission? What's your vision? What are your values? Because those should really drive the non-negotiables for your business, both internally and externally. And I think a lot of times businesses will tend to develop these things and they do it sort of in this silo, and then their mission and vision hangs somewhere on a wall, but doesn't actually drive decisions. So it's really important that you're clear on those things in your business, as well as your voice, your tone. How do we want to show up as a brand? So that's one leg of the stool. The other leg of the stool is really that piece of the market we talked about, is who are your competitors, and not just your direct competitors. We have a tendency to think, like, for me, I'm certainly not the only messaging strategist in the world, right? There are plenty of other messaging strategists, but they actually aren't my biggest competition. My biggest competition tends to be indirect competitors, maybe things like people using AI, or maybe other people, a copywriter who offers some messaging strategy underneath, or even just this idea of status quo. We'll just keep doing the same thing that we've been doing. So you have to understand how all of those things impact. And then the third leg of the stool is really about honing in on your target audience, not only who they are, but what triggers their buying decisions, what creates urgency for them, what are the problems that they really need for you to solve for them, and how are they thinking and how are they talking about it, so that you can craft messaging that will then resonate. And when you have all three of those things combined, that's when you can really figure out, how do we position ourselves in the market so that we can clearly communicate who we're for and who we help, and translate that into messaging that then helps them feel seen and know that, okay, this person is the right choice, or this brand is the right choice to solve my problem.
It seems like today, with there being so many options out there and there being so much noise, whether it be on social media or wherever you sort of look, the need to have quality and clear messaging is so important. Not even really to stand out, because I think it's less about standing out and more about signaling to the right sort of people. It's sort of that, like, I'm a parent and I have a 6 and 7 year old, and so I try and like lock in what my kids are wearing when we're around a lot of people, because if I'm looking for what they're wearing, it's much easier to find that because I know what I'm looking for. Because your buyers, they know what they're looking for. It's oftentimes about us sort of getting in front of them at the right time, and not having there be anything lost in translation, to letting them know that we can help them.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the message has to meet the moment. And that's the thing I think we tend to overlook, that we might have a massive audience. That audience is not, everybody is not ready to buy from us at a certain point, right? But what we need is this consistent message so that when they are, they can see themselves in it. And that's why I am so bullish all the time on really collecting voice of customer insights. How is it that they're talking about their problem? Because the way we talk about the problem we solve and the way our ideal clients talk about how their problem is impacting them day to day, those two are not the same things. And that's another mistake is we have this tendency either to kind of drift into insider language or just to talk about here's the outcome, here's what we can give you. But what they really need to hear is something that we recognize that, like, hey, when you should be watching your kid's soccer game, instead, you're busy thinking about this other thing that's showing up that's creating overwhelm or stress, and helping them understand we see you, right? And this is why we can help you. And if they don't hear that message, then they're going to tune you right out and go to someone else who is clearly saying that.
Yeah, I think also another challenge that, and you sort of hinted at the beginning, is that because getting out the message, the barrier is so low these days. Someone can start an Instagram page or a Substack, or anyone can start a website. So the accessibility is there, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be effective. Just because you can create a blog doesn't mean that it's going to work, or just because you can start Instagram or whatever, name your sort of platform or messaging platform of choice, that it's going to be effective unless you have the right sort of strategy behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say even the same is true for things like word of mouth or referrals, because there's very different for someone to say, hey, you should work with Hector, he's great, as opposed to you should work with Hector, he can help you XYZ, right? And so your messaging is so important because your message travels quicker than you do. And so the first time you're in a conversation with someone is probably not when they're developing their first impression of you. They've had that long before. And the impression that they've developed of you, whether it's from referral or what they saw on your website or Instagram or wherever you are, has to be consistent with what they see when they actually meet and talk with you. Because if not, you're just eroding trust before you've really even solidified it.
Yeah. And in a space where everything is being tagged, everything is being noticed, right? That someone can go onto an AI platform and say, "Who is Hector Santhi Esteban?" And I did that the other day, and it was like, "Well, he's a podcast producer in Southern California." But like, I was like, "Oh, that's me!" Like it sort of nailed it, and so that stuff is out there, and people are going to be looking to these ways to figure that stuff out. And so the clarity, I think, is going to go a really long way as we continue to move into this sort of post AI world.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think that consistency across your content, wherever it is, because that's what's showing up when people are searching you. It's the LLM results. They're quoting LinkedIn, they're looking at Reddit, they're looking at places where you are. And if you are not clearly communicating who you serve and how you help them, and you're not doing that consistently, it's not going to pick up on those patterns, right? And then when somebody does say who is, it's not going to necessarily be able to tell them all of the things that you offer or that you do because you haven't effectively communicated that.
We've talked a lot about how someone should show up. Do you have thoughts or ideas or insights on where people should be showing up and giving this messaging or delivering this sort of messaging?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, first is wherever your clients are. That's what you have to know. Where is your audience? I am definitely a huge fan of LinkedIn. My audience is on LinkedIn. Most of my clients that I've worked with, that's exactly where we know that people are. But it's a matter of figuring out what events are they going to. If you, like, I'm a speaker, so I want to know where are my clients going to hear advice on marketing? What podcasts are they listening to? And so it's really what platforms, but then also where are your competitors? Because you don't want to leave that space so wide open where maybe somebody's going to YouTube and one of your direct competitors is owning the space on YouTube and you're not necessarily found there. That being said, I don't think you necessarily need to spread yourself super thin across a zillion platforms. It's better to be on a few places and very clearly communicating what you do. And I still think the website's really important. Many people, whether they get a referral or not, they're going to head to your website. And more often now, they're heading there at a decision making stage, right? Like, I think I might be ready to buy. Does this person say the thing to compel me to buy? And I think we underestimate how important it is to still have that presence.
Yeah, I learned that I was doing some experimenting with our website, and I learned a very important lesson because one of our clients reached out and they said, "Hey, do you still do this thing? I was going to refer you, but I didn't see it on your website anymore." And I was like, "Okay, well, that's really good feedback because I thought I was trying to be slick with these new adjustments that I was making when it was actually just more confusing."
Yes. Yeah. And I think the website is one of those things in particular that we tend to either let go completely. I worked with a client recently who we worked on their positioning and messaging, and then I also did the copy for their website. And when we were talking about the website, I started asking them the questions. They're like, actually, I haven't been on the website in like 3 or 4 years. I should go look. It's like, all right, that's definitely too long. But it tends to be the thing that we either ignore or we just keep making little tweaks here and there, and we didn't do this cohesive strategic plan. And then it's so common that I hear somebody like, oh, I was on a call and somebody asked something about my website and I didn't realize that thing was still up or it wasn't still up.
Yeah, it becomes increasingly challenging, especially as the digital world continues to evolve. As you look at this sort of landscape, what are your thoughts on how that plays out for businesses? I think that social media and the internet obviously opened up the accessibility for businesses to be able to get their messaging out, but it definitely didn't make it simpler. And it definitely, I don't know that it's easy necessarily. It's accessible, but getting your messaging out there is not necessarily easy. How do you help businesses sort of navigate once they've got their messaging dialed in, actually getting it out and in front of their target audience?
Yeah. So, one of the things after we do positioning and messaging is I have implementation support that I provide to my clients. So, depending on the scope of what we do, sometimes we'll build out a whole content framework. So, we have figured out these are the places you need to be, create a strategic plan for how they can roll out being in those places. But that implementation support is really critical. We kind of figure where's the first place that we need to update or adjust your messaging. Often that's the website or LinkedIn, and then I help them implement the actual messaging. Either sometimes I execute and I do it for them, but a lot of times they might have small teams, someone's managing the content, or maybe they're handing this off to a PR firm. So they get a deck that kind of explains to them here's how you use this messaging in this context, in this place. And then they can share those assets with me and I give them strategic feedback. And I found this to be really beneficial because before I was doing that, I'd hand off these messaging documents, which were very clear to me, but then they would get them and be like, this is great, but what do we do without you? And so I help them with that implementation support so they know how to go in, how to utilize them, what they need when they need to be paying attention to which buyer they're talking to or buyer's journey or things like that. So we go from positioning to the messaging implementation support, and then that can stay ongoing for them as well. And often I execute on their assets too, like I said, like their website. So yeah, I don't, did I really answer your question or did I kind of talk around it there?
Well, one of the things that's coming out for me is I'm guessing that this thing is a living and breathing document because of one of the things that I do know about you is that there's a lot of sort of research and insight building that comes. I would imagine at the beginning, but I'm sure that once you sort of put the messaging out there, you start to get some feedback from them to iterate upon. And so I can see your sort of head nodding there. What's that process like, or how should someone sort of approach this initial document, if you will, and how it sort of evolves over time?
Yeah, I love that question because I think that's the other, back to your first question that you asked, that's actually one of the other huge mistakes that I see businesses make is like, oh, well, this is check. We have our brand messaging guidelines, check mark. We can say we've done that thing. Or they've come to me, like I said, they've hit a wall and maybe they did do this work early on, but so much has changed both in their business and in the market that it's completely out of date. So, yeah, absolutely. One of the things when we offboard is talking about what are the things you need to be paying attention to and listening to see what's resonating, what's not, what might we need to shift. I do offer for my clients, this is actually something recently that I started doing is after 6 months, offering a strategy session just to touch base back with them. Hey, how are things going? Let's just go ahead and look at what you have. Do we need to make adjustments? Do we need to make tweaks on things so that as your business is growing, we don't end up in this place where in, 3 years again, you're having to redo all of the work because you didn't keep up with it. So it's really just kind of checking in on what are the things that we've built and do these things still hold true over time.
Yeah, I think I don't know if victim is the right word to this, but I have done this. I've been guilty. I guess that's the right word I'm looking for. I've been guilty of creating a deck, creating a new messaging document, and then it goes in the archive and it goes in the Google Drive folder and it sits there. It gets digitally dusty. And then I bring up at our next sort of quarterly review and go, oh, yeah, we have this. We haven't done anything with it.
Yeah. And that's why I love doing that 30 days of implementation support. What my clients have said is before I started doing that, I would maybe look at something that they wrote and I'd be like, hey, are you checking in on your messaging guidelines? I'm not sure this is in alignment. And that's when I realized they needed that support. And ever since I've started doing that, my clients now say they're like, oh, we're in our messaging deck almost daily, right? Or we are consistently referencing it because they have an understanding of how to use it, right? This is really the foundation of all of your marketing efforts. And so they will check before they're doing anything, even if it's sending out proposals. And it's a document that they can use to onboard new people to make sure that there's consistency across the company. And even if you're a solo founder, it's very easy to lose that consistency across your brand when you're talking about you're trying to keep up with everything, whether it's your social presence, your website, even just networking introductions. So they love that 30 days of support because it teaches them like how do I actually use this document as a strategic asset, and then they can very quickly see when things are shifting or are no longer relevant.
Yeah. What's really cool about today and where we're at, we're recording this in May of 2026, which just seems strange. But with one thing that's coming online now is these things called MD files. And so for people who are in the AI world, if someone works with you, you can now take that document and put it into an AI agent. And the great thing about those things is they read the instructions every single time. And so if you are a solopreneur, you can sort of create these documents and put it into your AI system and everything will sort of follow what you guys worked on and it'll follow the messaging. And so before AI, these documents used to be just really sort of pretty things that you sort of think about and would make you feel good, like a mission statement or values or these sort of messaging guidelines. And sometimes people might read them when they're onboarded, but now if you have them, they can go into every single thing that you create. And I'm a big believer of a human in the loop to make sure that it's correct, but these things will save a lot of time and keep things a lot more aligned if you can sort of integrate.
They do. Yeah, and that's a great use of AI, right? Is to use that as a guardrail. I do that all the time. So after I write my newsletters or whatever I work on, I will put it right through my LLMs and I always have it analyzed for consistency with my tone, with my voice, with my messaging guidelines. And there are times where it will pick up like, "Hey, you didn't speak to this buyer at this stage. Do you want to address that?" And I'm like, oh, yes, it's so much easier. So I think it's allowed us as business owners to do things and scale in ways we never had the capacity to do before because of things like that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And the time spent doing some of the work that we talked about on this episode used to only go so far, but now it can really be leveraged and, to your point, scaled in a way that just wasn't possible 6 months, even a year ago.
Yes. Yeah. And I love that. I think obviously there are ways we don't want to use AI that are not necessarily beneficial for like straight content generation, things like that. But what I love about it is when you find the things that either there's patterns or that you're constantly analyzing in the same way, and you're able to create those same systems in AI to take over sort of like the task work, it frees you up for some more of that creative and strategic thinking that before you were spending so much time on whatever this process was or developing whatever this thing that you can do it quicker. So not only can you get your clients results quicker, but now you're freed up to maybe think of angles you hadn't thought of before or apply it in different ways.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, this has been such a great conversation that I think no matter when someone is listening to it, I think can be valuable. Is there anything else that we didn't touch on today that you think is worth talking about or related to today's conversation?
I don't think so. The biggest thing for me is always really about grounding everything in evidence and in insights. We have a tendency to kind of work off assumptions. And so, no matter how well you know your clients, it's really important that you're just actually collecting real insights in real time because what we think our clients want and need is often very different than what they say they want and need or what they maybe even do want and need. And so when we can understand what those insights are and how to collect them, then we can do the work of actually building this strategic foundation that can grow with us.
Yeah, I think to sort of go off of what we were talking before, it might also change whether it's from a technological impact, whether it's a socioeconomic impact. I mean, things are changing and adjusting so quickly that to think that our customers are going to be the same a year from now or 2 years from now, are going to be having the same issues or thinking about it the same way is sort of naive and short sighted. And I would imagine that business owners of past you could get away with that things we're moving at a pace where in a year or two we things would generally look the same, but I think that in a year or two things are unfortunately or fortunately depending on how you look at it are going to be radically different from how they are today, and so we have as businesses we have to be willing to sort of adjust and evolve. The good news is it seems that the tools that we've been up leveled in terms of the tools and technology that are accessible to us, but to that end, we do still need to make sure that we are gathering that data. And I think human analysis is important. We can run it through an AI, but I think that the human aspect is for the, until I see further, still going to be necessary in anything that we do.
Yeah, there's that discernment, right? And especially, I love to do client interviews. And when I'm talking with a client's client and doing that customer interview, like AI doesn't sense when somebody hesitates, right? Or when they pause or when body language shifts. And so, yes, I do run those transcripts and all of those things through AI to look for the patterns. But I also do that myself first because there's just nuance and things that you're going to pick up on as a human that a machine can't, at least not yet. And so, yeah, I think that human eye is critical. It's almost like I see it kind of like a collaborative partnership, right? Maybe AI will pick up on something I didn't, or maybe I'll pick up on something. But when you combine forces, then you're coming up with even just a more in depth analysis.
Yeah, you nailed it with discernment. Like that's one of the things I think that we humans index well on is discernment, at least right now for over AI, because some of these things I go, how did you think that was a good idea? How did you think that is something we should do? Whereas an adult seems to at least have hopefully have a little more rationality in it. Stacy, thank you for indulging me in this great conversation. I have two quick questions or two more questions for you. The first is if people want to find out about you, your services, get more connected with you online, where's the best place for people to go?
So LinkedIn is where they can definitely find me. So just linkedin.com/copy by Stacy. My website is a great place to visit to find out more about what I offer, which is just my name, stacyeleczko.com. And then I also provided a link for you for the show notes that has a document. And if they download it, can get on my newsletter then too. But basically, what that does is it'll tell them how to source those voice of customer insights we collected. It does have the exact AI prompts that they can use to go through and figure out what patterns to look for in those for their messaging. And then it also includes the exact survey that I launched to my clients to get some of those insights. And so, yeah, so then they'd be connected to me through my newsletter. So LinkedIn, my website, my newsletter are the three best places.
That is very generous, and we'll put that in the show notes for you listeners as always. And the last question for you, Stacy, is in your opinion, what is the secret to scaling your business?
Well, if I tell you, it's not really a secret. I would say don't skip the foundational work. I think it's really just a reiteration of kind of what I said, where businesses jump straight to tactics without doing the foundational piece. And then that's when your growth stalls and you can't guess your way to scaling. And so you have to be really crystal clear on your value, where you fit in the market, and all of that before you even try to translate that into messaging. And this idea that we talked about, right? It's not a one and a done kind of thing. And so you just have to keep evolving. And then when you treat it that way, now you've built something sustainable that will help build all of the marketing efforts that you're going to do. It'd be the foundation for that, for marketing, for sales, all the things in between.